Samoa. Capital, Apia. Flag. The upper left quarter of the flag is blue and bears 5 white, 5 red stars representing the Southern Cross, the remainder of the flag is red. Recommended for you most popular online universities. Anthem, the flag of freedom. Monetary unit, the Samoan tala, WS dollar, is a paper currency of 100 sene. There are coins of 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, and 50 sene and 1 tala, and notes of 2, 5, 10, 20, and 100 talas. WS dollar 1 equals US dollar 0.35962, or US dollar 1 equals WS dollar 2.7807, as of 2004. Recommended for you iPhone 7 offers. Weights and measures, British weights and measures are used. Holidays, New Year's, 1 to 2 January, Independence holidays, first 3 workdays of June, Anzac Day, 25th of April, Christmas Day, 25th of December, Boxing Day, 26th of December. Movable religious holidays are Good Friday, Easter Monday, and Whitmonday. Time, 1 a.m. equals noon GMT. Location, size, and extent. Samoa consists of the islands of Savai'i and Upolu and several smaller islands, of which only Manono and Apolima are inhabited. The country, situated almost centrally both in the Pacific Ocean and among the South Sea Islands, has a total land area of 2,944 square kilometers, 1,137 square miles, extending 150 kilometers, 93 miles, is WNW and 39 kilometers, 24 miles, NSSW. Savai'i and Upolu, separated by the Apolima Strait at a distance of nearly 18 kilometers, 11 miles, have a combined coastline of 403 kilometers, 250 miles. Comparatively, the area occupied by Samoa is slightly smaller than the state of Rhode Island. Topography. Located on the Pacific tectonic plate near the boundary of the Australian plate, the country lies within the area of Ring of Fire, a seismically active band surrounding the Pacific Ocean. The islands are, therefore, volcanic in origin, with coral reefs surrounding most of them. Rugged volcanic ranges rise on both islands. Volcanoes on Savai'i include Maga Afi and Maga Salai, the latter of which is the highest point in Samoa, with an elevation of 1,857 meters, 6,094 feet. Maga Fido is the highest point on Upolu, with an elevation of 1,116 meters, 3,660 feet. There are numerous swift-flowing, seasonal rivers on both islands. Apolima is a volcanic crater whose wall is pierced by a passage that connects its harbor with the sea. Manono, about 70 meters, 230 feet, high, consists chiefly of coral sand. These 2 islands lie within the Apolima Strait. There are also a number of underwater volcanoes in the region. Climate. The climate is tropical, but because of the oceanic surroundings, temperature ranges are not considerable. The hottest month is December, and the coldest is July. The mean daily temperature is about 27 degrees Celsius, 81 degrees Fahrenheit. The year is divided into a dry season, May to October, and a wet season, November to April. Rainfall averages 287 centimeters, 113 in, annually, and the average yearly relative humidity is 83%. Although the islands lie outside the normal track of hurricanes, severe storms occurred in 1889, 1966, and 1968. Trade winds from the southeast are fairly constant throughout the dry season. Flora and fauna. Lush vegetation covers much of the land. Along the coast there are mangrove forests, pantani, Barringtonia, hibiscus, and strand vegetation, commonly found throughout the Pacific. The adjacent lowland forest, which originally stretched inland over the lower slopes of the mountains, has been cut down extensively on Upolu and in more limited areas on Savai'i. Inland and at higher elevations, the rainforests contain trees and lianas of many genera and species. The higher elevations of Savai'i contain moss forests and mountain scrub. 50 species of birds are found, 16 of these are seabirds, many of which visit Samoa only during the breeding season. 16 of the 34 species of land birds are indigenous. Among the latter are small doves, parrots, pigeons, and wild ducks. The most interesting bird, scientifically, is the tooth-billed pigeon, Didunculus strigirostrispial, which some ornithologists regard as the connecting link between bird life of the present and the tooth-billed birds of zoological antiquity. The only indigenous mammals in Samoa are the rat, Masigulans peel, and the flying fox, Pteropus simensis peel. Numerous species of birds and mammals, chiefly domesticated, have been introduced by the Samoans and Europeans. 2 species of snakes, several different lizards, and the gecko are found. Insect life includes many species of moths, beetles, spiders, and ants. The mosquito, Stagomyia pseudoscutellarius, is a carrier of human filaria. Environment. Samoa's environmental problems include soil erosion, damage to the nation's forests, and the need for protection of its wildlife. The lack of adequate sewage disposal facilities, as well as siltation and industrial byproducts, threaten the nation's marine habitats. Samoa's water supply is too small to support its current population. Lake Lenotoo, Goldfish Lake, located on Upolu, is a Ramsar wetland site. The deep lake fills a volcanic crater with pea-green colored water. Wild goldfish inhabit its shorelines. According to a 2006 report issued by the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN, threatened species include 3 types of mammals, 7 species of birds, 1 type of reptile, 4 species of fish, 1 type of mollusk, and 2 species of plants. Threatened species include the humpbacked whale, albacore tuna, hawksbill turtle, Samoan moorhen, and Samoan flying fox. Population. The population of Samoa in 2005 was estimated by the United Nations, UN, at 188,000, which placed it at number 173 in population among the 193 nations of the world. In 2005, approximately 4% of the population was over 65 years of age, with another 41% of the population under 15 years of age. There were 108 males for every 100 females in the country. According to the UN, the annual population rate of change for 2005 to 10 was expected to be 2.4%, the highest growth rate in Polynesia and a rate the government viewed as too high. High emigration offsets the high birth rate. The projected population for the year 2025 was 193,000. The population density was 66 per square kilometer, 171 per square mile. The UN estimated that 22% of the population lived in urban areas in 2005 and that urban areas were growing at an annual rate of 1.82%. The capital city, Apia, had a population of 40,000 in that year. Migration. Under German colonial rule, many Chinese laborers were imported to work on plantations. More recently, there has generally been a net annual loss of population through migration. Emigration occurs mainly through students going to New Zealand to continue their education and Samoans seeking work there. In addition, several thousand Samoans live in American Samoa and other parts of the United States. The migration rate in 2000 was -22.8 migrants per 1,000 population, falling to -11.73 in 2005. Ethnic groups. Samoans compose about 92.6% of the total population. The Samoans are the second largest branch of the Polynesians, a people occupying the scattered islands of the Pacific from Hawaii to New Zealand and from eastern Fiji to Easter Island. Most of the remaining Samoans are of mixed Samoan and European or Asian descent. Euronesians, persons of European and Polynesian descent, make up 7% of the total, and Europeans constitute 0.4%. For many years, all inhabitants of Samoa were accorded a domestic status as Samoan or European. Residents are now officially classed as either citizens or foreigners. Among Samoan citizens, however, the distinction between persons of Samoan or European status is still recognized. Most Samoans live in foreshore villages, while non-Samoans predominate in Apia and its environs. Languages. Samoan is the universal language, but both Samoan and English are official. Some Chinese is also spoken. Most of the part Samoans and many others speak English, and it is taught in the schools. Religions. Over 99% of Samoans profess some form of Christianity, and religious observance is strong among all groups. The Congregational Christian Church of Western Samoa, a successor to the London Missionary Society, is self-supporting and the largest religious body in the country, representing about 34.8% of the population. The Roman Catholic, 19.6%, and Methodist churches, 15%, also have large followings. The Mormons, 12.7%, Assemblies of God, 6.6%, and Seventh-day Adventists, 3.5%, have grown in recent years. The country is home to one of 7 Baha'i houses of worship in the world. There are a small number of Muslims. The Constitution provides for religious freedom but describes the state as based on Christian principles and Samoan customs. Though the right to choose one's own faith is generally respected by the government, local village chiefs sometimes choose the religious denomination that is followed by their group. There have been cases where members of the village tribe who did not adhere to this designated faith were punished by tribal leaders or banished from the village. Transportation. The road system in 2002 totaled 836 kilometers, 519 miles, of which 267 kilometers, 166 miles, were paved. Most roads are on the northern coast of Upolu. Buses and taxis provide public transportation. In 2003, there were 6,400 passenger cars and 6,700 commercial vehicles. Diesel-powered launches carry passengers and freight around the islands, and small motor vessels maintain service between Apia and Pago Pago in American Samoa. Fortnightly cargo and passenger connections are maintained with New Zealand, and scheduled trans-Pacific services connect Samoa with Australian, Japanese, United Kingdom, and North American ports. Apia is the principal port. Asa, on Savai'i, was opened as a second deep-sea port in 1972. As of 2005, there was one cargo vessel of 1,000 GRT or more, totaling 7,091 GRT. As of 2004, there were 4 airports, 3 of which, as of 2005, had a paved runway. Faliolo Airport, 35 kilometers, 22 miles, west of Apia, is the principal air terminal. Polynesian Airlines provides daily air connections with Pago Pago and regularly scheduled flights to other Pacific destinations. Through Pago Pago there are connecting flights to New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. Air Samoa and Samoa Aviation provide internal air service between Upolu and Savai'i, and Hawaiian Airlines provides direct service between Honolulu and Faliolo and commuter service between Faliolo and Pago Pago. In 2001, the latest year for which data was available, 173,500 passengers were carried on scheduled domestic and international flights. History. Archaeological evidence on Upolu indicates that Samoa was colonized by maritime traders of the Lapita culture at least as early as the 1st millennium BC. From the mid-13th century genealogies, important titles, traditions, and legends give considerable information on the main political events. The first Europeans to sight the islands were the Dutch explorer Jacob Raaveen in 1722 and the French navigator Louis de Bougainville in 1768. But the world knew little about Samoa until after the arrival of the missionary John Williams in 1830 and the establishment of the London Missionary Society. Williams's arrival coincided with the victory of one group of chiefs over another, ending a series of violent internecine wars. Runaway sailors and other Europeans had already settled among the Samoans and assisted the chiefs in their campaigns. Whalers also visited the islands, and from time to time the warships of the great powers visited Apia to oversee the activities of whaling crews and settlers. Naval officers and missionaries began to consult with the dominant group of chiefs as if it represented a national government and treated its leader as a king. In time, semi-official representatives of Great Britain and the United States were stationed in Apia. Between 1847 and 1861, the United States appointed a commercial agent, and Britain and the city of Hamburg appointed consuls. Factional rivalries took a new turn as British, U.S., and German consular agents, aided sometimes by their country's warships, aligned themselves with various paramount chiefs. Intrigues among the chiefs and jealousies among the representatives of the great powers culminated in civil war in 1889. In the Berlin Treaty, which followed, Britain, the United States, and Germany set up a neutral and independent government under King Malitoa Lapepi, and their consuls were authorized to constitute Apia as a separate municipality. The death of King Malitoa in 1898 led to a dispute over succession, and the three powers intervened once again. In 1899, they abolished the kingship, and in 1900, they signed a series of conventions that made Samoa a German protectorate. The German administration continued to experience difficulties, leading to the exile of several Samoan leaders and the suspension of others from office. With the outbreak of World War I in 1914, New Zealand military forces occupied Samoa, and from 1919 to 1946, New Zealand administered the islands as a mandate of the League of Nations. In 1927, local opposition to the New Zealand administration among both the Samoan and the European communities resulted in the formation of a nationalistic organization known as the MO, which embarked on a program of civil disobedience. Its members withdrew from political life, from schools, and from all contact with the government. The protests lasted in one form or another until 1936, when the leaders of the MO reached an agreement with the administration and re-entered the political life of the territory. In 1946, a trusteeship agreement was approved by the United Nations, UN, General Assembly, and New Zealand formally committed itself to promoting the development of Samoa toward ultimate self-government. The passage of the Samoa Amendment Act of 1947 and a series of further amendments governed Samoa's subsequent evolution toward independence. An executive council was reconstituted in 1957, and the New Zealand High Commissioner withdrew from the Legislative Assembly, which thenceforth was presided over by an elected speaker. In 1959, an executive cabinet was introduced, and in 1960, the Constitution of the independent state of Samoa was adopted. This was followed by a plebiscite under UN supervision in 1961, in which an overwhelming majority of voters approved the adoption of the Constitution and supported independence. On January 1, 1962, Samoa became an independent nation under the name of Western Samoa. Tupu Atamazes Mili and Malitoa Tanumafili II became joint heads of state. When the former died on April 5, 1963, the latter became the sole head of state. Fiamfamuina Mataufa was independent Western Samoa's first prime minister, 1962–70, and served again in that post from 1973 until his death in 1975. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, Western Samoa suffered from a worsening economy and growing political and social unrest. A divisive public sector strike from 6 April to June 2, 1981 cut many essential services to a critical level. The leadership of Tupu Olusegun, who later became head of the Christian Democratic Party, CDP, and was prime minister in 1976, was successfully challenged by the Human Rights Protection Party, HRPP, which won the February 1982 general election. Judicial rulings regarding electoral fraud subsequently nullified some of the election results, and Tupuola returned to power from September to December. On December 30, 1982, however, a second HRPP government was formed, with Tafalaeta, the new HRPP leader, as Prime Minister. Controversy erupted in 1982 over the signing of a protocol with New Zealand that substantially reduced the right of Western Samoans to New Zealand citizenship. Tafalo resigned in December 1985 after his budget failed to win approval, and Vakalone became Prime Minister in January 1986 as head of a new coalition government comprising 15 CDP members and 12 former HRPP members. Tupuola was named Deputy Prime Minister of the new government. Tafalaeta, leader of the HRPP, was re-elected Prime Minister in April 1988 as a result of a contested election that was settled by a judge flown in from New Zealand. A gradual deterioration in the bilateral relationship between Samoa and New Zealand continued as the two nations disputed the special immigration quota applied to Samoans. In October 1990, a referendum on the issue of universal suffrage narrowly passed. A proposal to establish an upper legislative chamber composed of traditional chiefs failed. In 1991, in the first elections held under an arrangement of universal suffrage, the HRPP won 28 of 47 seats and Tafala once again became Prime Minister. Among the new ministers appointed was Fiam Naomi, the first female cabinet member, becoming Minister of Education, Youth, Sports and Culture, and Labor. In elections held April 26, 1996, Tafalaeta retained his post as Prime Minister. In July 1997, following an affirmative vote by the Legislative Assembly, the country officially changed its name from Western Samoa to Samoa. Tafalaeta resigned due to poor health in November 1998 and died in March 1999 at the age of 74. He was succeeded by Deputy Prime Minister Tele''P.A. Sayalumali'ilajai. In elections held March 2, 2001, Tele''P.A. retained his post as Prime Minister, with the HRPP taking 23 seats in the whānau. The Supreme Court ordered 4 by-elections, which were won by the HRPP, bringing its total to 30 of 49 parliamentary seats. The HRPP formed a government with the support of several independent members of parliament. In June 2002, New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark issued an apology to the Samoans for injustices inflicted upon them during colonial times. During the time when New Zealand ruled the country, from 1919 to 1962, 22% of the population died as a result of an influenza virus introduced to the islands, and in 1929, New Zealand police fired upon and killed 9 people during a rally for independence. In the early 2000s, Samoa again faced economic concerns. Declining fish catches led the government in 2004 to appoint a committee to investigate the problem and to consider suspending fishermen's loan payments. In addition, the government banned scuba fishing with the hope of allowing the fish populations to rise. In 2005, Samoan doctors struck for higher wages and better working conditions. When their demands were not met, 25 hospital doctors resigned, while foreign doctors maintained a skeleton crew. In December 2005, Samoa was still negotiating for membership in the World Trade Organization, WTO, for which it first applied in 1998. A key issue in the negotiations was the privatization of Samoan public services. Opponents of Samoa joining the WTO cited concerns that Samoa could lose control of its natural resources and find its markets saturated with cheap inferior goods from overseas. Government. Executive power is vested in the head of state. Although Malaitoa Tanumafili II, head of state in 1962, had lifetime tenure, the constitution took effect 1st of January that year. It provided for his successors to be elected for a term of 5 years by the whānau, or Legislative Assembly. The powers and functions of the head of state are far-reaching. All legislation must have his assent before it becomes law. He also has power to grant pardons and reprieves and to suspend or commute any sentence by any court. Executive authority is administered by a cabinet consisting of a prime minister and 12 other ministers appointed by him. The head of state and the cabinet members make up the executive council. The 49-member parliament consists of the head of state and the whānau. 47 Samoan members are elected out of the approximately 20,000 Matai, traditional chiefs or heads of families, in 6 two-seat and 35 single-seat constituencies. The election of the 47 Samoan members is by universal adult suffrage. Citizens of non-Samoan origin who qualify for registration on the individual voters' roll elect the 2 other members by universal suffrage. The next elections are to be held no later than March 2011. Political parties. Technically, candidates for public office campaign as individuals, but political parties are becoming increasingly important. The Human Rights Protection Party, HRPP, was founded in 1979 as an opposition party to the government of Prime Minister Tupuola Ifa. Tupuola's followers, although not yet formally organized, had, in effect, constituted the ruling party. Tupuola later became the head of the Christian Democratic Party, CDP. Other parties winning seats in the 2001 elections were the Samoan National Development Party, SNDP, which took 13 seats, and the Samoa United People's Party, SUPP, which took 1 seat. Independent candidates won 11 seats. The next elections were to be held no later than March 2006. Local government. With the exception of the Apia area, local government is carried out by the village whānau, or Council of Matai and Orators, and where and when necessary, through meetings of Matai and Orators of a district. The main administrative link between the central government and the outside districts is provided by part-time officials in each village who act as government agents in such matters as the registration of vital statistics. Local inspectors represent the various government departments. Judicial system. Court procedure is patterned after practices in British courts. Samoan custom is taken into consideration in certain cases. English is the official language of the court, but Samoan is also used. The Supreme Court has full civil and criminal jurisdiction over the administration of justice in Samoa. It is under the jurisdiction of the Chief Judge, who is appointed by the head of state, acting on the advice of the Prime Minister. The Court of Appeal consists of 3 judges, who may be judges of the Supreme Court or other persons with appropriate qualifications. Magistrates' courts are subordinate courts with varying degrees of authority. The highest, presided over by the senior magistrate, may hear criminal cases involving imprisonment of up to 3 years or cases involving only fines. The Land and Titles Court has jurisdiction in disputes over Samoan land and succession to Samoan titles. Samoan assessors and associate judges possessing a good knowledge of Samoan custom must be present at all sittings of the court. Lawyers are not permitted to appear in the Land and Titles Court. Each party appoints its own leader, usually a chief or an orator. Court decisions are based largely on Samoan custom. Some civil and criminal matters are handled by village whānaus, traditional courts, which apply a considerably different procedure than that used in the official Western-style courts. The Village whānau Law of 1990 affords legal status to the decision of the village whānau and allows the appeal of whānau decisions to the Land and Titles Court and to the Supreme Court. In July 2000, the Supreme Court ruled that the Village whānau law could not be used to infringe upon villagers' freedom of religion, speech, assembly, or association. Armed Forces. Samoa has no armed forces and relies on its police force for internal security. The government foresees no military development because of financial considerations and the absence of threats from abroad. There are informal defense ties with New Zealand under the terms of the 1962 Treaty of Friendship. International cooperation. Samoa became a member of the United Nations, UN, on December 15, 1976. It belongs to ISCAP and several non-regional specialized agencies, such as the FAO, the World Bank, UNCTAD, UNESCO, and WHO. The nation also participates in the ACP Group, the Asian Development Bank, the Commonwealth of Nations, G77, the South Pacific Commission, the South Pacific Regional Trade and Economic Cooperation Agreement, SPARTACA, the Alliance of Small Island States, ASIS, and the Pacific Island Forum. Samoa has observer status in the World Trade Organization. An Inter-Samoa Consultative Committee, made up of representatives from Samoa and American Samoa, holds meetings alternately in both countries to discuss matters of mutual interest. By treaty, New Zealand is the exclusive representative of Samoa in the conduct of its foreign affairs outside the Pacific region. In environmental cooperation, Samoa is part of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Kyoto Protocol, the Montreal Protocol, MARPOL, the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and the UN Conventions on the Law of the Sea, Climate Change, and Desertification, Economy. The economy is based largely on agriculture, which, including fisheries, provides 50% of the gross domestic product, GDP, and employs 2/3 of the workforce, mostly in subsistence farming of food crops. In addition to agricultural exports, tourist revenues and remittances from overseas workers are also important sources of foreign exchange. Economic performance has suffered since 1990 due to the devastation to crops, tourism, and infrastructure caused by Cyclone Zoph and Val. In 1993–94, a fungal disease reduced taro production by 97%, threatening the island's basic food crop and causing negative growth in the economy. Samoa has the highest unemployment rate and the lowest wages in Oceania. In 2004, the GDP growth rate was 1.9%, down from 3.5% in 2003. The inflation rate registered a sudden jump in 2004, to 16.4%, as a result of food shortages caused by hurricane damage early in the year. By the middle of 2005, the inflation had been brought back down to 7.6%, and it was on a continued downward trend. Great hopes are set for the tourism industry, with visitor numbers expected to double by 2010. The main engine of this growth trend is a new airline, Polynesian Blue, which operates flights between Samoa, Australia, and New Zealand. Income. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, reports that in 2005 Samoa's gross domestic product, GDP, was estimated at $1.0 billion. The CIA defines GDP as the value of all final goods and services produced within a nation in a given year and computed on the basis of purchasing power parity, PPP, rather than value as measured on the basis of the rate of exchange based on current dollars. The per capita GDP was estimated at $5,600. The annual growth rate of GDP was estimated at 5%. The average inflation rate in 2001 was 4%. It was estimated that agriculture accounted for 14% of GDP, industry 23%, and services 63%. According to the World Bank, in 2000, remittances from citizens working abroad totaled $45 million, or about $253 per capita, and accounted for approximately 19.5% of GDP. Labor. In 2000, there were approximately 90,000 workers in Samoa. The majority were engaged in agriculture, and cash crops are raised as supplements to subsistence crops. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing account for 65% of wage employment, services account for 30% and industry for 5%. Although there are no data on unemployment in Samoa, underemployment is known to be substantial. There are only 2 trade unions in the country, representing workers at the 3 major banks and the country's only factory. Although small, a trade union movement has been established. Public employees are represented by the Public Service Association. Approximately 20% of the workforce is unionized. Over the years, thousands of skilled and semi-skilled Samoans have left the islands, drawn away mainly by better economic opportunities in New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. Labor is generally restricted to a 40-hour week. Payment is in cash, and in many cases rations are also supplied to workers, either as part of their wages or in addition to them. In the most cases, living quarters are provided for plantation workers. The minimum hourly wage was 47 cents in 2001. Samoan labor law provides for rudimentary safety and health standards, but these standards are not effectively enforced. Children may not work before the age of 15, but the law does not apply to service rendered to the Matai, who sometimes require children to work on village farms. Moreover, increasing numbers of children work as street vendors in Apia. Agriculture. Tropical agriculture occupies 46% of the land area, employs about 34% of the labor force, and makes up about 12% of gross domestic product, GDP. Most Samoans grow food crops for home consumption and cash crops for export. Village agriculture, in which the family is the productive unit, involves the largest areas of land, occupies the preponderance of the labor force, and produces the major portion of food and cash crops. Coconut products, cocoa, taro, and bananas are produced for export, and bananas, taro, and tamu are grown for local sale. Village plantings are invariably mixed, containing some or all of the following crops: coconuts, cocoa, bananas, taro, tamu, breadfruit, sugarcane, yams, manioc, and various fruits. Plantation agriculture has been controlled mainly by non-indigenous residents. Exports of unprocessed copra have been largely replaced by coconut oil, coconut cream, and copra cake. In 2004, coconut production was estimated at 140,000 tons. Taro, cocoyam, production in 2004 amounted to 17,000 tons. Taro production dropped 97% in 1993 to 94 due to leaf blight, and the government is working on methods to control the disease. Exports of cocoa have fallen in recent years, thereby discouraging production. Since 1991, no production over 1,000 tons has been reported. Banana exports fluctuate greatly from year to year. Exports of agricultural products in 2004 amounted to $5.6 million, while agricultural imports totaled $40.6 million that year. Animal husbandry. Pigs and cattle form the bulk of the livestock. In 2005, pigs, which are common in the villages, were estimated to number 201,000 and cattle 29,000. A small number of cattle are kept for milk, the remainder are raised for beef. Nearly one-half of the cattle population is owned by Western Samoa Trust Estate Corporation, WSTEC, the most progressive cattle breeder. Other livestock in 2005 included an estimated 7,000 donkeys and 1,800 horses. Meat production in 2005 was 5,140 tons, 74% of it pork. Fishing. The government has sought to expand the fishing industry, but most fishing is still conducted along the reefs and coasts. Deep-sea fishing, save for bonito and shark, is not developed. A $3 million fish market and wharf, built with Japanese aid, was completed in Apia in 1982. The local fish catch, however, steadily fell from 4,020 tons in 1982 to 565 tons in 1991. By 2003, the catch rebounded to 10,267 tons, with tuna comprising about 40%. Forestry. The nation's forest area is estimated at 105,000 hectares, 259,000 acres. Reforestation projects are concentrated on Savai'i, which accounts for 80% of the nation's forest area. A large-scale timber milling enterprise, established on Savai'i in 1970, began to produce kiln-dried sawn timber and veneer sheets for export. Roundwood production in 2004 was 131,000 cubic meters, 4.6 million cubic foot, with 53% used as fuel wood. Timber imports were estimated at $5.6 million in 2004. Mining. No minerals of commercial value were known to exist in Samoa. Energy and power. Samoa formerly depended heavily on imported energy, but hydroelectric power, first available in 1985, has greatly increased its generating capacity. In 2002, net electricity generation was 0.111 billion kilowatt-hour, of which 50.5% came from fossil fuels and 49.5% from hydropower. In the same year, consumption of electricity totaled 0.103 million kilowatt-hour. Total installed capacity in 2002 was 0.029 million kilowatt. Samoa has no reserves of oil, natural gas, or coal, nor any refining capacity. All fossil fuel needs were met by imports of refined petroleum products. In 2002, imports and demand each averaged 1,020 barrels per day. Gasoline and distillates made up the majority of those imports at 400 barrels per day and 450 barrels per day, respectively. Industry. The government has encouraged industrial growth, and manufacturing, geared mainly to processing primary products, is increasing steadily. Industries include food and timber processing facilities, a brewery, cigarette and match factories, and small individual enterprises for processing coffee and for manufacturing curios, soap, carbonated drinks, light metal products, garments, footwear, and other consumer products. A coconut oil mill, an additional coconut cream factory, a veneer mill, and a meat cannery began operations in the 1980s. In 1991, the Japanese Yazaki Samsa Company began manufacturing automotive seat belts. The firm also produces electrical wiring systems. In 2000, the industrial production growth rate was 2.8%, less than half the GDP growth rate in the same year and an indicator of an underperforming sector. In 2001, industry accounted for 23% of GDP, services were the main economic engine, with a 63% share. Although agriculture had only a 14% share in the economy, it employed two-thirds of the labor force and was responsible for 90% of total exports. Science and technology. New Zealand provides extensive scientific and technical aid to Samoa. Other donors include Japan, the Federal Republic of Germany, FRG, Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, has an integrated field office in Apia to promote science in the Pacific states. The National University of Samoa, founded in 1988 at Apia, has a Faculty of Science. The University of the South Pacific, founded in 1977 at Apia, has a School of Agriculture. Domestic trade. Apia, the capital, is the center of commercial life. Many firms act as agents for shipping and airlines and for overseas commercial organizations generally. Outside Apia, trading stations, linked with the capital by launch and road transport, collect, produce and distribute consumer goods. Several major firms operate about 200 stations in the outer districts and secure a large share of the total commercial business. There are also a number of smaller firms and independent traders. In Apia, various firms and small shops sell imported commodities and domestic products. Open markets sponsoring local produce vendors are a common food retailing situation for a nation where 65% of the workforce is employed in agriculture. The largest such market is Mekaifu in Apia. Office hours are from 8 a.m. to noon and resume from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Foreign trade. The fact that Samoa has a limited number of exports, principally agricultural and timber products, renders its economy extremely. Country exports-imports balance. World 87.1 150.5-63.4. Australia 62.2 33.3 28.9. United States 11.4 20.9 -9.5. United Kingdom 3.9 1.32.6. Japan 2.87.8-5.0. New Zealand 2.454.6-52.2. Tokelau 1.2, 1.2. New Caledonia 1.0, 1.0. Italy San Marino Holy See 0.70.20.5. China, Hong Kong SAR 0.41.5-1.1. Germany 0.30.20.1, data not available or not significant. Vulnerable to weather conditions and market fluctuations. Imports consist chiefly of machinery and equipment, industrial supplies, and foodstuffs. The principal exports include fish, coconut oil and cream, copra, taro, garments, and beer. Foodstuffs and industrial supplies account for about 50% of the country's annual imports. In 2004, exports totaled $94 million, FOB, free on board, while imports grew to $285 million. Most of the exports went to Australia, 67.2%, the United States, 5.7%, and Indonesia, 5.3%. Imports included food and live animals, mineral fuels, crude non-fuel materials, beverages, and tobacco, and primarily came from New Zealand, 25.1%, Fiji, 21.5%, Taiwan, 9.1%, Australia, 8.9%, Singapore, 8.5%, Japan, 7.5%, and the United States, 4.7%. Balance of payments. In the early 1970s, Samoa's heavy trade deficits were largely offset by tourism revenues, remittances from Samoans working abroad, and long-term investment capital. By the early 1980s, however, rising import costs and declining export earnings led to a critical balance of payments situation. By 1992, the external account deficit, excluding grants, had increased to about 28% of GDP. Samoa's external debt stood at $192 million in 1999. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, reported that in 2000 the purchasing power parity of Samoa's exports was $17 million, while imports totaled $90 million, resulting in a trade deficit of $73 million. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, reported that in 1999 Samoa had exports of goods totaling $20 million and imports totaling $116 million. The services credit totaled $61 million and debit $25 million. Exports of goods and services totaled $98 million in 2004, up from $86 million in 2003. Imports grew from $154 million in 2003 to $181 million in 2004. The resource balance was consequently negative and on a downward path, from -$68 million in 2003 to -$83 million in 2004. An opposite trend was registered for the current account balance, which improved from $8 million in 2003 to $15 million in 2004. Foreign exchange reserves, including gold. Current account 18.2. Balance on goods -97.5. Imports -115.7. Exports 20.3. Balance on services 36.8. Balance on income 0.4. Current transfers 41.6. Capital account 24.5. Financial account -0.7. Direct investment abroad. Direct investment in Samoa. Portfolio investment assets. Portfolio investment liabilities. Financial derivatives. Other investment assets. Other investment liabilities -0.7. Net errors and omissions 2.1. Reserves and related items -7.0, data not available or not significant. Increased to $204 million in 2004, covering more than 6 months of imports. Banking and securities. Legislation in 1974 set up the Monetary Board to act as the central bank. The activities of the Monetary Board were taken over in May 1984 by the new Central Bank of Samoa. An Australian bank, ANZ, acquired the government's 25% stake in the Bank of Western Samoa, BWS, becoming its outright owner. The BWS is the largest bank in the country, with assets of about $16 million, US $13 million. The government has sold its Post Office Savings Bank, POSB, to a consortium of local businesses. The bank, to be renamed the National Bank of Samoa, is the country's first locally owned commercial bank. The other banks are Pacific Commercial Bank, owned by Westpac, the Bank of Hawaii, and local shareholders, and the Development Bank of Western Samoa. Parliament passed legislation in early 1988 to allow banks to set up offshore banking centers. More than 1,000 companies have registered in Apia under the new tax haven legislation, contributing substantially to the national budget. The International Monetary Fund reports that in 2001, currency and demand deposits, an aggregate commonly known as M1, were equal to $24.5 million. In that same year, M2, an aggregate equal to M1 plus savings deposits, small time deposits, and money market mutual funds, was $86.6 million. Insurance. There is a private life insurance company in Apia, National Pacific Insurance Limited, managed by the National Insurance Company of New Zealand. Public finance. Samoa's financial year ends on 31st of December. Government budgets commonly show deficits. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, estimated that in 2001-02 Samoa's central government took in revenues of approximately $105 million and had expenditures of $119 million. Revenues minus expenditures totaled approximately minus $14 million. Total external debt was $197 million. Taxation. Individuals and companies are liable for the payment of income tax. The basic non-resident corporate tax rate is 48%, and the resident corporate tax rate is 39%. Rates for both domestic and foreign insurance companies are lower. Personal income tax rates range from 5 to 50%. There are also gift, inheritance, and stamp taxes. Customs and duties. Customs duties provide almost half of current government revenues and are levied on all imports except those specifically exempted. Preferential rates for imports from Commonwealth countries were abolished in 1975. Foreign investment. The government actively promotes the establishment of industries financed by overseas companies. These include milling and logging operations by a U.S. company on Savai'i and by a joint Japanese-Samoan enterprise on Upolu, and a U.S. hotel resort center near Apia. Economic development. The government has consistently stressed diversification of agriculture. It has also sought to promote growth in manufacturing, forestry, fishing, hydroelectric power, and tourism, which received a boost when the Whalango Airport got a new terminal and runway extension in 1985. In 1989, an offshore banking center was launched. New Zealand, Australia, the United States, the Asian Development Bank, and the European Community are major sources of development aid, and Japan and Germany have provided technical and financial aid. Assistance from the UN family of organizations totaled $2.6 million in 1991. The country's fifth development plan, 1985-87, called for an investment of $146.9 million, $114.2 million of it from external sources. Investment increased significantly in 1990 and 1992. Mainly due to increased public capital expenditures. External aid has been a major source of public investment financing, providing approximately 68% of capital expenditures in 1991 and 47% in 1992. The Samoan economy remains dependent on foreign aid, remittances from overseas, agriculture. It employs 2/3 of the labor force and accounts for 90% of total exports, and fishing. Tourism is a sector of increasing importance, and the government is implementing infrastructure changes, most notably, a new airline, that it hopes will double visitor arrivals by 2010. Social development. A social security system was established in 1972 under the Western Samoan National Provident Fund. It provides for employee retirement pensions, disability benefits, and death benefits. Employees contribute 5% of their earnings, and this amount is matched by their employers. Retirement is allowed at age 55. Workers' compensation is funded by employers and is compulsory. This program covers reasonable medical expenses and is paid for entirely by employer contributions. Domestic abuse is common and considered culturally acceptable, except in the most extreme cases. Police are rarely notified and domestic issues are resolved within the village structure. Universal suffrage was enacted in 1990, and the following year, a women's affairs ministry was established. The government sponsors literacy programs to assist in integrating women into the economic mainstream. Human rights are generally well respected in Samoa. Health. The Department of Health oversees healthcare on the islands. The country is divided into 14 health districts, each under a medical officer. In 2004, there were an estimated 70 physicians, 202 nurses, and 18 dentists per 100,000 people. District nurses are stationed at strategic points throughout the islands. Child health clinics, particularly clinics for young children and infants, are a regular feature of their work. Approximately 91% of children were vaccinated against measles. A mobile dental clinic operates in the villages, while all schools in Apia are visited at regular intervals by a team of dental practitioners. Diabetic retinopathy is common in Polynesian Samoans. The increase in diabetes has been linked to the westernization of the Samoan diet. The life expectancy was estimated at 70.72 years as of 2005. During the same year, the infant mortality rate was an estimated 27.71 per 1,000 births. As of 2002, the crude birth rate and overall mortality rate were estimated at 15.5 and 6.4 per 1,000 people, respectively. The immunization rates for children under age 1 were as follows: diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus, 95%, polio, 95%, measles, 98%, and tuberculosis, 98%. Tuberculosis and AIDS are present but not considered major problems. Housing. Most Samoans live in villages in traditional Samoan houses called fales. A fale is usually round or oval, with pebble floors and a thatch roof. It has no walls, being supported on the sides by posts. Coconut leaf blinds can be lowered to exclude wind and rain. In areas more affected by contact with Europeans, the fale may have a concrete floor, corrugated iron roof, and latticework walls. Another fused Samoan European type, much used by chiefs and pastors, is an oblong concrete house with some walls, often with separate rooms in each corner. Like the fale, it is open at the sides. Fales are grouped around an open area in the center of the village and have separate cookhouses behind them. More modern housing has been constructed since about the 1990s, primarily through international assistance. Solid wall structures with concrete foundations and iron roofs have been built to withstand the natural elements of harsh wind, rain, and cyclones. However, low-income families are not able to purchase or build such structures without assistance. The Housing Corporation of Samoa was established by the Housing Corporation Act of 1989 to offer loans and assistance for prospective homeowners. In 2001, there were about 23,059 households in Samoa. The average number of members per household was 8. Education. Formal education is provided by the Department of Education and 5 religious missions. Government and mission schools have a uniform syllabus and common examinations. The government school system is more comprehensive, with almost all teachers holding Samoan teachers' certificates. Village schools provide 4 years of primary schooling. District schools draw the brighter pupils from village schools and educate them through the upper primary level. In the Apia area, urban schools provide a lower through upper primary curriculum. A major educational goal has been to make Samoans bilingual, with English as their second tongue. In the senior classes of the primary schools, all instruction is in English. The government maintains secondary schools, in which the medium of instruction is English. Samoa College is patterned after a New Zealand secondary school. Each year, 100 pupils from government and mission schools are selected for admission by competitive examination. Upolu High School, in Savai'i, provides a general secondary curriculum, and Apolima College, in Apia, offers training in modern agricultural methods. In addition, the University of the South Pacific School of Agriculture maintains a campus at Alafua, on the outskirts of Apia. The medium of instruction in mission secondary schools is English, with curriculum and textbooks similar to those used in New Zealand. In 2001, about 54% of children between the ages of 3 and 4 were enrolled in some type of preschool program. Primary school enrollment in 2003 was estimated at about 98% of age-eligible students. The same year, secondary school enrollment was about 62% of age-eligible students. It is estimated that nearly all students complete their primary education. The student-to-teacher ratio for primary school was at about 27:1 in 2003, the ratio for secondary school was about 21:1. In 2003, private schools accounted for about 16.6% of primary school enrollment and 31.7% of secondary enrollment. Samoa was one of the founders of the Regional University of the South Pacific. The National University, which was established in 1984, was upgraded and provided with a new campus in 1997. Other tertiary institutions include the College of Tropical Agriculture and a trades training college. In 2001, it was estimated that about 7% of the tertiary age population was enrolled in tertiary education programs. The adult literacy rate for 2004 was estimated at about 98.7%. As of 2003, public expenditures on education were estimated at 4.8% of GDP, or 14.6% of total government expenditures. Libraries and museums. The Nelson Memorial Public Library in Apia has 90,000 volumes. The Library of the University of the South Pacific has around 22,000 volumes, and the Legislative Assembly has a library with 6,000 volumes. A bookmobile service operates on Upolu and Savai'i. The National Museum and Culture Center in Apia, established in 1984, includes a local museum, library, and theater and offers crafts workshops. Apolima is home to the Robert Louis Stevenson Museum, featuring the author's house and estate. Media. Internal and overseas wireless telegraph services are available. In 2002, there were 11,800 mainline phones and 2,700 mobile phones in use nationwide. The government-controlled Samoan Broadcasting Service, in Apia, transmits radio programs on 2 stations in Samoan and English and provides direct broadcasts from the whānau. In 2004, there were 5 private radio stations and a satellite cable system available in parts of Apia. One of the 2 television stations was owned by the government. In 1997, there were 323 radios and 25 television sets in use per 1,000 population. In 2002, there were 4,000 internet subscribers. There are several bilingual weeklies, including Le Samoa and Savai'i, published in Samoan and English. There is one daily, the Samoan Times. The Constitution provides for free speech and a free press, and the government is said to respect these provisions in practice. Organizations. The Samoa Chamber of Commerce and Industry is based in Apia. Youth clubs include the Boys Brigade Samoa, University of South Pacific Student Association, and YMCA/UA. There are several sports associations representing such pastimes as squash, weightlifting, badminton, taekwondo, and sailing. Many of these are affiliated with the National Olympic Committee and other international organizations. Volunteer service organizations, such as the Lions Clubs International and the Calliope Lodge of Freemasons, are present. Women's organizations include Seroptimist International of Samoa, Mothers Club, Federation of Women's Committees, and the Southeast Asia and Pan-Pacific Women's Association. Mapusaga Oaga Samoa is a national organization promoting public awareness of issues concerning child abuse and domestic violence. There are national chapters of the Red Cross Society and Habitat for Humanity. Tourism, travel, and recreation. Until 1965, official policy in Samoa was opposed to tourism, but during 1966–67, there was a complete reversal of policy. The government hired international tourism consultants to advise it on long-term means of developing a tourism industry. Samoa joined the Pacific Area Travel Association, extended tax holidays and import duty concessions to hotel builders, and appropriated money for the building of new hotels. The major tourist attractions are the beaches and traditional villages. In Apia is Vailima, the residence of the head of state and once the home of Robert Louis Stevenson. Stevenson's grave is nearby. Pastimes include swimming, water skiing, and fishing. Football, soccer, cricket, and rugby are popular local sports. Travelers to Samoa must have a passport valid for at least 6 months, as well as an onward/return ticket. Visitors do not require a visa or entry permit for stays of up to 60 days. In 2003, 92,313 tourists visited Samoa. Hotel rooms numbered 939, with 2,131 beds. According to 2005 U.S. State Department estimates, the daily cost of staying in Samoa was $207 per day. Famous Samoans. The Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson, 1850–94, lived principally on Upolu from 1889 until his death. Samoans famous since independence include Malaitoa Tanumafili II, B. 1913, who was named head of state in 1962, and Fiamfamuina Matafa, D. 1975, who served as Prime Minister from 1962 to 1970 and again from 1973 until his death. Tupu Olataziafa, B. 1938, was Prime Minister from 1976 to 1982. Tafa Laeta, B. American Samoa, 1924 to 99, was Prime Minister from December 1982 to December 1985, when he resigned and was succeeded by Vaikalone. Sailmali Ilajitala 'E.P.A. B. 1945, has been Prime Minister and Foreign Minister since 1998 and was re-elected in 2001. Dependencies. Samoa has no territories or colonies.